I'll begin this afternoon's session with a brief introduction. Welcome to the Canadian Institute of Forestry's National Electronic Lecture Program. My name is Sharon Young, and I will be hosting today's session. Today is Thursday, November 14th, 2024, and this is the second session in the e-lecture series entitled Inspiring Community Action, Connection, and Stewardship. How can civic involvement support Canadian urban forests? The series is brought to you by Tree Canada. The CIF-IFC is very pleased to collaborate with Dr. Adrina Bardakjian and the team at Tree Canada to host these webinars. Today's webinar is titled From Tyranny to Hope, Small Decisions as a Lever from Strategic Change in Urban Forest Management. A special reminder that the ISA-certified arborists are eligible to receive one continuing education unit for this webinar. Please email electures@cififc.org with your full name and ISA-certified ID in order to obtain the ISA continuing education unit. Once we verify your attendance, we'll send your information to ISA for them to process. Today, we have Kaylee Hutt-Taylor, Coordinator of Research and Engagement from Tree Canada, to introduce today's e-lecture speaker. With that, I will now pass it over to Kaylee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for our second e-lecture session. On behalf of Tree Canada, we're so pleased to be bringing together forestry and allied professionals to learn on this topic. Thank you again to Sharon for all your coordination and to the Canadian Institute of Forestry for partnering with us on this e-lecture series. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Dr. Corinne Bassett. Corinne is a researcher and urban forester and is passionate about inspiring action and stewardship of urban nature. She completed her PhD at the University of British Columbia, Faculty of Forestry on the Vancouver campus, and she has managed statewide urban and community forestry programs and performed arboricultural consulting and municipal tree care across US. I'm really looking forward to her talk today. I'll let you take it away, Corinne.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaylee. And thank you to Tree Canada for finding my research, inviting me to talk about this work, and CIF also for hosting. I'm just so honored and excited to share these ideas actually for the first time, which are built off the work of so many others. And the paper I'll be sharing today was part of my PhD research at the University of British Columbia, though now I'm currently a postdoc researcher at the Milken Institute School of Public Health in George Washington University, where I'm working with Dr. Kelvin Fong, who's an environmental epidemiologist, actually Canadian. So my connection to Canada is alive and very well maintained. But today I'll be talking about my PhD research. Though speaking to you from the Washington, D.C. area, which is the traditional and ancestral lands of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway people, and also where the main campus of George Washington University is located. So a little overview, I'm going to talk about my motivation for this research, which really comes from getting to know me and my background a little bit better. Then this idea, the tyranny of small decisions as a framing for understanding how small decisions can have big impacts. Then we'll bring it to urban forestry and talk about how small decisions can be a lever for change for much bigger goals. And as a little motivation to stay till the end, I've got some hopefully fun, new-ish urban forestry communication ideas. Really wish that there was some sort of way to hear everybody laughing at my jokes when I present those at the end, but I'll just listen to myself, I guess. So like I said, today I'll be presenting research from my dissertation at UBC, and this research came from skepticism and questions that I developed over years working in urban forestry in cities across the US, from Pennsylvania to California to Hawaii. I worked as a consulting arborist, assessing individual urban trees, making management recommendations, and also as an urban forester, planning large-scale tree planting projects with community partners. So, here I am. There's all these places. And I found that for the programs I was working in, as well as my professional peers in the industry where I was learning from, we talked a lot all the time about how the trees we were planting, these were going to solve the big pressing sustainability issues that cities were facing: urban heat, mitigating stormwater, sequestering carbon. But I found that these conversations were often very disconnected from the decisions that we made about how to take care of trees at the site level. And I was just increasingly concerned and motivated about how to better connect site level actions with city level goals and initiatives. So I spent 5 years focusing on that. Let's consider this tree. When I took it, it was recently planted. Dick took this picture. It was recently planted at a park in Vancouver that I used to walk by every day. I just love this picture because when I saw this tree planted in the late fall, I noticed it planted, and then less than 2 weeks later, it was almost run over by a truck. You can see these tire marks on the ground. And it was a city park, so they even had taken the time to put a little trunk guard at the base and a little mulch ring, which just looks super helpless next to these big tire tracks. And something about this gloominess, the gloominess of this picture really speaks to me. But anyways, like what are the potentials for the future of this tree? Before it was planted, the location and the species selection set this tree on a trajectory. We know that there are different species that are better for certain wildlife. Different species can potentially have different impacts on air quality. It can produce food that humans or wildlife can eat or not. Any number of options for the trajectory of this tree were made before it was even planted. And now, of course, provided it doesn't get run over, many management decisions will be made about it. And hopefully it's very long life. And arborists and urban foresters know that these can be really consequential for how long the tree lives, its health, also its risks to people and property. And decisions later in life for this tree can even have consequences for carbon emissions and for wildlife habitat, depending on how it's eventually removed from the site. So we're establishing that different small decisions at the tree level can set this tree and this site on different trajectories into the future. Okay, small decisions. Then we've also got big sustainability problems. I don't have to tell this audience twice. We're dealing with flooding, heat waves, forest fires, public health challenges, many, many more. And how do cities typically go about addressing big problems? By writing plans, setting strategic sustainability goals. Really exciting. But in all seriousness, we've established that small decisions are impactful and we have big problems. So pretty bluntly, how do we go about connecting these? How do we ensure that all of these small decisions at scale are putting us on track to reach these really critical goals that we have? And what is the role of urban foresters and other actors in doing that? We know that we're intermediaries. We have access to both of these types of decisions and plans and issues. But what do we do about that space? So let's take a step back. Urban forestry is certainly not the only field dealing with the connections between small decisions and big problems. This is a fundamental challenge. The tensions between different scales of actions and goals is a challenge dealt with in many, many fields. So to really examine that, I turned to an economic phenomena called the tyranny of small decisions. This is a phenomena that was described by economist Alfred Kahn in 1966. And it describes how small decisions made by individuals can be rational within the context that they're made, but can accumulate to have negative system-wide consequences. And And this was brought to the environmental world, I think, first by this paper in the 80s by William Odom, where he describes the context primarily in the context of wetlands. And he says, gives this example: no one purposefully planned to destroy almost 50% of the marshland along the coasts of Connecticut and Massachusetts. And in fact, if the public had been asked whether coastal wetlands should be preserved or converted to some other use, preservation would probably have been supported. But through hundreds of little decisions and the conversion of hundreds of small tracts of marshland, a major decision in favor of extensive wetland conversion was made without ever addressing the issue directly. Now, I think that this is this example of many small decisions made without being connected to bigger level problems is one that we also find in urban forestry as well. Here's an example, another beautiful drone picture taken by Sophie Niedislawski in Ontario. And we can see the tyranny of small decisions play out in, for example, urban land development, really similar to the wetland development example I just gave. In this case, the decision is the decision to create this housing development. When you're doing one or two, that can be fine, but when repeated at scale, of course, we're losing huge swaths of forests and ecosystems. And you can scale even further down. Every management unit or parcel is a place where small decisions can occur and will be made, whether someone is there to influence them or not. You know, this landscape here can be one of lawns and concrete, or could be one of huge ecological diversity and functionality. So what are other small decisions in urban forestry, not just the land development one? Well, there's most fundamentally the decision to either have a tree or not to have a tree is the most basic, but there are also small decisions throughout the entire management life cycle, from decisions before you even plant a tree in the planning and design phase, to how you prepare the site, how you plant it, how it's maintained, and how it's removed. And those can all impact the health and longevity of trees, but also impact the type and magnitude of benefits that the trees provide. So, okay, how do we respond? What does the tyranny of small decisions look like, and how do we respond to it? So let me tell you another example here. This is a hypothetical example of a city that's just conducted a urban tree canopy analysis. So you can see my little illustration of the outlines of the canopy on this aerial city map. They've discovered that here's what it looked like, 10 years ago, and now huge swaths of forest have been taken out, and they've detected that small privately held parcels are a significant source of tree removals. And so this would be an example of the tyranny of small decisions. Many of the exact same decision were made by people mostly without relationship to each other. This is a death by 1,000 cuts scenario. And all of this could derail progress towards sustainability goals, which require urban forests. Now, it would be unreasonable to expect all of these individuals to all of a sudden start making decisions on their own in a different way when this is the trajectory that they're on already. So discovering and identifying the tyranny of small decisions does necessitate a strategic response, some kind of planned way to influence and get at these decisions. But what should that be? So one approach, which has some pros, like efficiency, for example, are options which can restrict those small decisions. An example of that would be a tree bylaw or a municipal tree ordinance, some sort of like blanket restriction saying against private property tree removals. And there's definitely evidence that shows that those can really result in fewer tree removals. But there's a lot of downsides that can be really unpopular, that can be incredibly costly to enforce. At the site level, decisions to save one tree and remove another can really seem very arbitrary. And it's very difficult to write policy which considers local context effectively. Other massive, like big tree planting campaigns sometimes can fail to understand the context in where they're suggesting that trees should be planted, and focusing on the number of trees in the ground instead of potentially survival or the ways that local communities want the trees to be planted also have lots of downsides. Lots of instances of high mortality from focusing on the wrong goal, species site mismatch, even communities rejecting at whole scale trees that are planted. Of course, I'm illustrating, worst case scenarios in all of these, but I think that we can all think of examples of tree bylaws resulting in unintended consequences, and also tree planting campaigns also not reaching their goals. So both of these widely attempted solutions to the negative outcomes from these are solutions to discovering the tyranny of small decisions in many cases, and they can fail when there's not a sufficient role for local knowledge, not a sufficient role for that social knowledge and ecological knowledge that's needed to know what to plant and where, and how to keep those trees alive in that context. And this knowledge is often held by local experts and community members and is not easily accessible by high-level actors, and also not practical to be written into policy with a lot of detail. So what's our silver bullet? Oh, people again. And in this paper, we describe places where instead of turning to solutions which can trample those small decisions, it might actually be more effective to empower the people on the ground that have knowledge to make those small decisions in the best way. And so now you're thinking, great, all of this, and all you're going to say is it's great to empower people. That's actually the theme of this webinar series, so nothing new. Well, what we have to offer is 3 specific contexts of cases where small or local stewards can be, we think, most effectively empowered to direct small decisions towards strategic level sustainability goals. Think of goals again, like climate change mitigation or heat reduction, stormwater at a city scale. These are situations where we really do want to affect the small decisions of many, many actors. Again, very tempting to try and influence with top-down policy, but we also just described that there are many ways where in urban forestry, the landscapes can be too heterogeneous at fine scales. The decisions can be too complex to really be effectively regulated from above, unless there's also a role and place and support and capacity for local knowledge. So yes, one of these contexts is situations when factors vary at such fine scales. Think about the number of factors that are needed to be considered just to choose the right species for the right space. This is something that cannot be dictated from above. And that's, I think, a lot of the reason why cities are turning to recommended tree species lists and not required tree species lists, for example. Another situation when it makes sense to turn to local actors is when there already are professionals and volunteer stewards like qualified arborists, like urban foresters, and a whole communities of civic stewards that are both operating and have the local knowledge needed to make sure that the right small decisions are made. They have knowledge that's not available to higher up actors, and it often doesn't make sense to create rules and policies that control their actions, because the knowledge that they have is necessary to keep trees alive. It's very basic. And there are also many situations when local actors are already motivated by higher level goals in stewardship. There are many community members that are already motivated by strategic level needs, like the need to mitigate and adapt to climate change, and leveraging and serving their existing motivations can really help enlist them to make decisions that serve local and strategic goals instead of trampling their agency. All right, so just showed some broad ways that top-down policies can be ineffective at countering the tyranny of small decisions. And I gave 3 contexts where a better way to prevent this tyranny from resulting in negative consequences could be to empower small decision makers. But let's talk a little bit more about these small decisions. What else can we hope to gain from thinking and focusing on the small decisions in urban forestry in different ways, especially in terms of achieving higher goals? So let's take a bit of a turn here. Small decisions, they will be made whether or not they're connected with strategic goals. And part of our message is that these are places that can really be, where the magic happens. They can be leverage points that we can take advantage of. For one, overlooking the power that they hold, the power of the trajectories that these points can set trees on, but also the power of the potential for collective action, really overlooks one of the most powerful forces for change that we have, which is self-organization. And I really encourage people to read this classic paper by Donella Meadows, Places to Intervene in a System. I've been turning back to it recently, and that's very inspiring. But let's look, what does this mean? Trampling actions at a local scale, for example, dictating requirements for landscaping or tree planting or tree care, it not only risks forcing the wrong decision for that site by, for example, forcing one tree to be planted over another, but it misses out on the potential for individuals to find creative solutions that align with both local and strategic goals. So these are both gardens in Vancouver that could really only occur if with the drive and the creativity of individuals and community members. Additionally, the physical labor that's required to steward urban nature in these ways, this requires the taking of so many small decisions, so many actions, planting, watering, pruning, mulching, that can result in deep site scale relationships that connect people not just to their yards and their land near them, but also to entire ecosystems. Some other creative examples that show the power of people to self-organize. Here's one on the left here, a sign asking people to respect the birds on their street. Over here on the right, someone had turned a dead tree into a beautiful lighthouse sculpture. And this example that I love from when I lived in San Diego, some people came to us about wanting to water newly planted trees at a campsite that they frequented, and had observed that everybody at the campsite dumped their ice buckets just like into the parking lot on the side. And noticing that, which is only something you would notice if you were really deep into this place, had a whole little messaging program developed to encourage people to instead use that water to water the new trees. So there's lots and lots of examples. I'm sure you can think of many in your own communities. People self-organizing in ways that align with higher level sustainability goals, and doing so in creative ways that really could not have been designed from above. So again, many small decisions in urban forestry that can be really powerful when engaged. But how do we look at all of these as potential leverage points? How do we look at actions in all of these stages, and how do we get to them? Because again, what we're talking about is not just expecting necessarily for them to happen on their own, or ways to that we can encourage them more, I guess. So let's add in another idea here, another layer. Small decisions are a space that we can enable a very powerful force, relational values. This is a picture of a traffic circle in Vancouver as part of the Green Streets program. And this sign says here, the local resident caring for this garden needs more help. Now I'd say this is an example of trying to focus on relationships, human-human relationships, but also human nature. This sign is not saying something like, this green space supports stormwater mitigation. Talking about how this green space supports stormwater mitigation would be an example of an instrumental value. It's talking about what something does, how it functions, versus this campaign here is really trying to motivate the action being taking care of this small garden, by focusing on relationships between people and people in place. And there's a lot of growing evidence that relational values can be really even more powerful motivators for stewardship and action than our typical ecosystem services argument. For one thing, relationships are irreplaceable. An individual or a community's relationship with a tree or a park or a forest, it really can't be replaced with another tree, park, or forest as easily, which is in contrast to ecosystem service arguments, which really often describe services in a very replaceable way. Just think about someone saying, you know, this tree could cool your house in 30 years. Well, if that's your argument, you just lost to an air conditioner, a much more effective cooling system, honestly. Well, so most urban forestry communication in the last 20 years, especially, has used advances in ecosystem services science as the primary advocacy tool. I've done a lot of looking, and I have yet to find evidence for or against, honestly, on how effective this is at causing behavior change in urban forestry specifically. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence for sure, for and against, at talking about the benefits of trees and ecosystem services as a reason to make different decisions in urban forestry. But I have yet to see any studies on that. So if you find any, please let me know. But there are things that we can learn from our allied fields in conservation and many other fields where there has been some research about the effectiveness of different using different types of values and messaging. But our current paradigm, this really relies on a framing of what can nature do for you? What can nature do for you? And as for some examples, so I don't want to call any groups out. So these are literally signs that I've made in my past. I blurred out the organizations because that's not the point of this, but the themes here are really classic, focusing on shade, beautification, increasing property values, keeping your home cool. I'm sure you've all seen many similar signs in messaging. I'm not trying to knock ecosystem services because, again, talking about the benefits of trees, talking about the ways that urban forests and urban trees can connect to other issues like stormwater or climate change. That has really propelled the field in many ways. So I'm not trying to knock it, but remember what we're talking about here is how to engage and unleash and scale small decisions made by individuals towards greater sustainability goals. And there are alternative messaging and approaches that we can take. So here's the fun. Okay, promise some fun new communication strategies at the end. Here we go. Oh, okay, another academic figure. So bear with me. In this paper by Kai Chan and colleagues, they reviewed a lot of literature on sustainability and ways to promote action, and identified a series of leverage points for sustainability at large. And many of these, I think, could be really powerful to help us better engage small decisions in urban forestry. So what have we done so far? We've established that small decisions in urban forestry are a special place. They're a place where actions can be taken. People can be creative. They can live out their values in these actions. But what values are most effective at stirring people to action? I want to talk specifically about these leverage points that they identified here. The first one is embrace diverse visions of a good life. Visions of a good life. The next here is unleash latent values of responsibility. That's just the idea that within people, everybody has values of responsibility and duty that can be acted on. And the final I'm going to focus on is promoting education, knowledge generation, and sharing. Okay, so what does it look like to try to take advantage of these leverage points, these ideas, these values to motivate how small decisions are taken? And here's where I get creative. Imagine a sign, a poster, messaging says, "What are we teaching our children? Plant a tree." This type of idea could really be inspiring people to imagine a different life than the one that is currently represented or manifesting in their neighborhood. It's also relying on responsibility to teach the next generation and share knowledge. 80 years ago, someone planted this tree for your picture. What will your legacy be? Again, trying to touch on something deeper within people, more responsibility. This tree is in a landfill. Reuse urban wood. Plant trees to shade your neighbors. This example, shade is still another like ecosystem service or benefit, but specifically linking it to service to your neighborhood and other people could be a way to really latch on to these other types of values. All right, maybe you're saying that's a little touchy-feely, Corey. We know benefits are the most important. Those are a little direct. But let's look at another example of the way of really successful ways that behavior change for very small decisions has been influenced through messaging focused on values. Another example you guys are all familiar with, Coca-Cola. In all seriousness, Coca-Cola rarely talks about the benefits or the functions of their product. They're always trying to tap into some of the strongest, most motivating, deeply held human feelings to motivate the behavior that they want, which is for people to buy Coca-Cola. So they're always trying to get people to envision a different good life, and that would be a good life with a bottle of Coke, even trying to align with reducing material waste, sharing relational values, share a Coke with a friend, maybe share a tree with a friend. So just some ideas that came from this. All right. Now, of course, this messaging must always be made with attention to the communities that you're working with. And here's two studies I wanted to highlight. I really love these that showed the effectiveness of working with communities in really hyperlocal ways to craft messaging and programs. They were both about enabling really specific small decisions. In this case, they were both about tree watering very specifically. So I would really encourage you to look at them. They're both open access at the Arboriculture, Journal of Arboriculture and Urban Forestry, which is on ISA's website. This one on the left was in Los Angeles. They held focus groups to understand some of the biggest barriers to watering and taking care of trees, and then crafted messages specifically about that neighborhood. They were talking about barriers like what side of the street or what days of the week street parking was allowed to help people coordinate when they could water, really down to local issues. And this left one one on the right in Indianapolis showed the effectiveness of engaging neighbors with each other and building relationships. All right, so to bring it back home, we started out by establishing that seemingly small, inconsequential decisions in urban forestry, like what to plant, how to care for trees, can accumulate to wide system level consequences for urban sustainability, like losing urban forests at scale. And that these small decision points can be leverage points for either failing to achieve or achieving sustainability goals that rely on the benefits of urban forests. This is an issue that people in many fields struggle with, connecting small decisions with goals, and then the negative consequences of when they're not connected, the tyranny of small decisions. And there's also a lot of downsides that top-down policies can trample the agency of small decision makers and overlook local knowledge. I've identified that small-scale decisions can be leverage points, and we talked about 3 contexts where it makes sense to empower local stewards in service of strategic goals, and gave some fun examples of ways to not just enable local knowledge, but unleash more actions towards sustainability goals with new sets of values. So with that, I really want to thank my co-authors and PhD committee, Susan Day, Cecil Kaneinendijk, Kai Chan, and Lara Roman, and acknowledge this research was supported in part with funding from SSHRC. And this paper was part of also a greater project involving other studies on small decisions and strategic sustainability goals called Street Tree Futures. And also to thank my current employer, the Milken Institute School of Public Health at GW. And you can get in touch with me here.
Thank you, Corey. That was a great presentation. Now let's move on to the questions. While we're waiting for people to finish typing their questions in the Q&A pod, I'm going to launch the post webinar survey. Just one moment. So there are 2 questions in total. You may need to scroll down to see the second question. You know, we received some comments in the chat pod, so I'm going to take a look there. People are commenting that maintenance is always a challenge without funding. And we have a participant, and he was hoping you could share the link to the research.
Great question. So this research is still under review, so I can't share a link to it, but you can find my dissertation on the UBC Library website.
Thank you, Corey. The second comment was, this research remind me of moving to self-actualization hierarchy with respect that Maslow's needs triangle altruism as a driver. Any comment, Corey?
Yeah, I think that, I think I've seen a lot of other people in urban forestry use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So people who aren't familiar with it, it's like a pyramid, which describes the base level needs of people as, food and shelter, and safety, and then moving up to things like community and connection. I forget what the other ones are, and the top being, I think, self-actualization is what he was saying. And yeah, that's a really great and like motivating framing, I think, for thinking about how to connect care of our very immediate environment with needs that can be motivating to people.
Thank you, Corey. Next comment is totally agree that current urban forest messaging has had its day. Very interested in techniques to convert the unconverted people who are disinterested or hostile to trees.
Yeah, I think that there is I've seen some research in other like conservation fields, not urban forestry specifically, that talks about like our conventional messaging around let's say climate change or ecosystem services type messaging really hits best with people who already want to protect the environment. And so I was hoping to kind of stir up some new ideas for ways to engage the people that are not already on board with values that I think everybody has in terms of wanting to be a responsible and good citizen.
Thank you, Corey. Before moving on to the next question, I just want to quickly remind everybody this session is being recorded, and the recording link will soon be posted on the CIF website, as well as Corey's presentation slide. So the next comment in the chat is, great presentation. Thanks for sharing your research, Corey. Do you have any thoughts about how to mitigate neighborhood tree losses that are expected with increased multiplex development? I'm thinking specific to BC with a small scale multi-unit housing legislation.
Yeah, I think that is a little bit of a different context than the one I talked about throughout the webinar today, because how like a big development comes into play. There's a lot of different actors involved, but there are still some similar themes. And I mean, the examples I gave towards the end of like making a flyer aren't going to work necessarily. You can't just like hand a flyer to a big development corporation and expect it to really like engender a new, change the path that they're on. So sorry that I don't have anything for you in this presentation, but there is a lot of work being done on that issue at UBC too.
Thank you, Corey. Next comment in the chat is, as urban areas experience more disasters like floods, droughts, fires, mudslides, etc., trees and forested areas will hopefully being seen as important prevention. Any comments, Kari?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that linking like small actions to those bigger issues is important. But I think that sometimes they're too distant. And it's really hard to make a compelling case that planting a single tree or mulching or watering your tree, for example, even though they're things that need to happen, are going to have an impact at those large scales. And so I think that there are other ways that we can motivate and create a paradigm shift in how individuals make decisions when they're not connected to each other.
Thank you, Corey. So now we're gonna move on to the questions in the Q&A pod. The first question for Corey is, I would like to know if in your recent field of study, public health, you can link a minimum tree cover per hectare or by population density to the impact on public health?
Yes, in some ways. There has been a lot of research that attempts to do that. Not that I have done, I just started my position a few months ago. But there is research that, especially in the domain of trying to look at effects on air pollution, for example, and then correlating it with different rates of public health indicators. That's really strong in the field of environmental epidemiology. But I don't think that there is a standard that works in all areas by any means. But there's a lot of really strong and compelling cases that, of course, like trees and urban nature support public health in different ways, but there's not like a minimum tree cover per hectare that is going to result in a knowable like dose response, for example.
Thank you, Corey. Moving on to the next question. Can we promote proposals for funding to change from majority as 1 year now to minimum of 2, better 3 years to allow time to measure growth and success of plantings? Benchmark inventory not enough unless follow-up Alice for ACER. And then any comments?
I totally agree. I think from my experience working with like tree planting grants, a lot of those conversations can happen if you get in early with the people who are writing the specs, or if you develop relationships with the people who are monitoring the funding after the fact. It's a compelling case to say that the trees will survive if you plant fewer of them and monitor for 3 years. But you have to push for it, unfortunately.
Thank you, Corey. Moving on, for the next question, do you have any advice for approaching community groups and seeing if they are receptive to collaborating with municipalities?
That's a good question. For approaching community groups, if you're coming from the municipality, my experience is that there's usually already lots of community groups collaborating municipalities, and to get new ones involved. Great ways to start a new relationship. I heard someone say at a workshop you should start with your start the relationship by giving and not asking. Don't go up to people with your hand out for example, go up with your hand up. And so I think the groups are often really receptive and excited to collaborate with municipalities. It's important to know what the history of between groups and municipalities is, but then also acknowledge that they're always usually strapped for time, and not to see community groups as like a source of like free volunteer labor, for example, but as the people that you're tasked with serving. And I think that changes the relationship a lot too.
Thank you, Corey. I think we answered all the questions so far. Oh, I just saw one more comment in the chat. Thanks, Corey. An interesting topic. I'm going to take the small decision by reading your research paper. Some aspects of this presentation give aha moments. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, hopefully the final version will be available, but who knows how long the peer review process will take. So 1 to 8 months from now, I'll be able to share.
Keep my fingers crossed, Corey. All right, if there are no more questions, I would like to bring this session to a close. Thank you all for participating in today's webinar session. And once again, thank you very much to Corey for the great presentation. Bye, everyone.